Right, joined now by cultural expert Professor Musa Xulu. Talk more about this visit and the ongoing battle for the throne. Kabasha, good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on this evening. This visit by the king to the kraal of KwaPhindangene certainly goes a long way in extending some degree of an olive branch, or maybe one would even say in clearing the air that could have been quite tense between the two families.
Yeah, no, definitely. Good evening, Mr. Mdluli, and your viewers. It was important that the visit happens at this stage, because as you rightly say, there had been lots of tensions between His Majesty the King and the late Inkosi Mangosuthu Buthelezi. And Inkosi Mangosuthu Buthelezi's daughter pointed it out last week when she was addressing the members of the Zulu royal family on Monday last week. And therefore, it was important that the air gets cleared. Although you know that in reality, when it comes to how these things are done culturally, you have to go through what had gone wrong and then correct it. But going there, I think, was a very good move on the side of the king, so that he can now see eye to eye with the Buthelezi family of KwaPhindangene, as well as the clan of the Buthelezis. Yeah. Now, we don't know what will happen later, because you know that Inkosi Mangosuthu Buthelezi was very much central to the Zulu kingdom.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's important that before the future is determined, the relationship between His Majesty the King, the Zulu royal household, and the Buthelezi clan be cleared. And I think that was the first step today, which was very good.
So Prince Zuzi Buthelezi saying in him, of course, relating the last moments of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, that his father would, even at his frail state, still be articulating that he wants the matter of the royal family to be settled and finalized. What would that mean in essence?
Well, there are two issues here. The first issue is that the royal family has taken each other to court, and there are two other contenders to the throne, mm-hmm. in the persons of Prince Smaragde and Prince Buzavazi, and the court cases are coming up next month during October. So that's conflict in its own, and therefore the Zulu royal household is not united as a result of that. You saw, for example, that when the royal household members came there on Monday last week, it was mainly people who are on the side of Prince Buzavazi. The side of Prince Smaragde has not yet pitched there. Maybe they'll be coming at some stage. And then His Majesty's side came today. So that's division. It means that there are three sides there. I think that's what Inkosi Mangosuthu Buthelezi was worried about, firstly. And secondly, he was worried about his own personal relationship, which is now well documented with His Majesty over the last 4 or 5 months, as a result of them not seeing eye to eye on the issue of Ingonyama Trust. It had been hoped that His Majesty and Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi would get time to drink tea together while Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi was still alive. It did not happen. But culturally, it can still be done and it needs repentance, and it needs payment of maybe some kind of cows to address the dead now, the prince who is no longer here, and the ancestors to ask for forgiveness in terms of whatever misunderstanding was there, and clear the air. There are cultural procedures on how to do that. They are well known.
Yeah, interesting that you raise these three sides that are now all going to pay their respects at the Buthelezi family. one have already been there, well, at least two now have already been there. Now we're hearing that Prince Smaragde or Smaragde might be going there, but going in his capacity to say as a king. And how does that articulate itself? I mean, would the prince need to have written to the Buthelezi family to say, I'm coming there as Isilo, I'm coming there as what? And what preparations does the family make to receive him? Because we are hearing from the acting king of the Buthelezi family that, well, he can come, but he can come as Smaragde and nothing else.
Well, you must recall, and your viewers will recall, that the Smaragde faction acknowledged Prince Smaragde as a king. And they did the Ungena Esbayeni rituals during August last year, just a week before King Misuzulu did the same at Wakangela on the 20th of August last year. So you will find that there's always going to be these contestations. The utterances by the acting Inkosi of the Buthelezi today, I don't know whether they were necessary or not. Maybe it should not have happened in that way, because no one is disputing that King Misuzulu is the king, the reigning king of AmaZulu at the moment. And that is why there are court cases. And if he was not, there would not be court cases. The court cases are to clear the procedures and so on. Maybe whenever the Smaragde faction comes, they will clarify in what capacity they are coming. I don't think that publicly they can, at this stage, declare that he is a king, unless there are thought patterns that move in the direction of permanent separation from the mainstream of Zulu kingdom, of the Zulu royal house, which is possible.
Would you say, for example, the ritual of cleansing a king, because a king is not supposed to have come to a memorial or a funeral or where there's bereavement, and we saw when the king arrived there was a cattle that was appointed to him as the one that would have been used for cleansing the king in that instance. Would a ritual like that be significant in terms of who it is performed for? And would Smaragde get the same kind of ritual in his appearance there?
No, Prince Smaragde will, I think, basically be in the same category as the faction that went there on Monday last week. He could come with a cow himself and donate it to Buthelezis, but he did not have personal differences that were very severe between himself and Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. The cleansing and reconciliation that I was talking about between His Majesty and the Buthelezi clan is a different ritual process altogether than what was happening today. What was happening today is called Ubona, to go there and visit and mourn and comfort people. And I think later they may decide that they should sit down and look at how to clear the air between the two families, the Buthelezis and the royal family. The court cases that will come may determine again eventually either that King Misuzulu is the rightful king, or maybe something went wrong during the process of his nomination, and any other thing that can happen. I know there's a lot of cultural issues that have been raised in the courts, and maybe it will depend on who presents what in front of the judge.
But how significant is the Buthelezi family picking a side here, where they would be saying, well, we recognize only Misuzulu KaZwelithini as the king of the Zulu nation?
King Misuzulu KaZwelithini was already recognized by President Ramaphosa. And those that are disputing based on the issues that happened before the Ramaphosa certificate. The Ibamba Bukhosi, the acting chief of the Buthelezi people, as I say, I don't know what motivated him to have to say that, because in terms of the death that has happened, there has not been any dispute around from the Buthelezi people or from anyone who was there that King Misuzulu is king. So I don't know what motivated him to say that today. For me, it was not necessary to say it, because why do you say that the sun rises in the east and insist that the sun rises in the east when the sun rises in the east in any event? Why make a dispute out of that? So maybe there were other issues that he was trying to raise, which we'll see unfolding in the next few days or weeks, maybe around who gets what position next and so on. These days, things are very fluid. So you would not be able to say, because somebody said this today, it means that.
Yeah.
We will see as things unfold in the coming days or weeks, because Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi still has to be replaced, and the Buthelezi clan maybe still has to get Prince Zuzifa as the rightful chief of the Buthelezi clan.
Right.
All those things will happen in due course.
We'll swing back to that in a moment, but I want us to wrap this part a little bit. Who will then, because normally we would have had Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi guiding Isilo on these matters and how to navigate them. Who will be guiding the king now in, for example, the kind of processes of that ritual that you mentioned, but also how to navigate this next step of the appointment of the Prime Minister?
You will remember that there was supposed to be appointed some time ago, maybe last year, to be appointed what is called the Kingship Royal Council, which would have been statutorily the one that would be helping His Majesty the King to sail through this very difficult time. And for now, it's only those few that are around him, informal friendships and others who are surrounding him, that will be guiding him what to do. And that's going to call for a lot of experience and knowledge on how these things get done. It's going to be difficult, as I say, because there's no real structure now around the king, except that Inkosi Mangosuthu Buthelezi was himself a complete structure and had all the knowledge. Now that he's not there, it's going to be very difficult. The likely scenario that will happen, which would be advisable, would be for His Majesty to call a royal meeting, royal household meeting for everybody, and let everybody discuss openly how they want to move forward.
Yeah.
But of course, with all these factions, is possibly not going to happen also that one.
Yeah.
So we shall see what happens in the next few days or weeks. What is likely to happen, though, is that the appointment of the next traditional prime minister may be delayed as a result of not being sure about what qualities His Majesty or the nation would be looking for.
Let's get to that. Let's stay with us, Professor Musa Xulu, cultural expert, talking about the succession debates around now the Prime Minister of the Zulu nation. So, I mean, Inyosi Buzetsheni Mdletshe recounting the lineage or the line of prime ministers earlier on, in one of the clips, talking from Ngomane Kamqondoli right up until Mnyamane Kangalele, and how those processes happened. And then when it comes to Dinizulu, he didn't have a prime minister because of the fighting and going to jail, and there's a whole lot of sorts of issues that came with that. And then there was the Buthelezi family coming in from King Solomon, I think in 1925, and it stayed there right up until now, the passing of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. If you look at all those other appointments or the announcement by the king on who is going to be the prime minister, what made it different from 1925 that it would remain in the Buthelezi family?
Well, in 1925, it was more of a process of reconciliation between the Buthelezis and the royal family, they had to reconcile because there had been an incident, one or two, when the Buthelezi and King Dinuzulu, who was fighting with the English. Sometimes King Dinuzulu would not take advices from Prime Minister Nyamana. And Prime Minister Nyamana at some stage decided to just stay at his homestead palace of Shumaileni and not participate in the royal affairs until he died. So there was a period of about 10, 15 years when the Buthelezis just were not, maybe even more, were not part. So King Solomon felt that it was necessary for the relationship between the Buthelezi family and the Zulu royal household to be restored. That's why he spoke to his sister, Princess Magogo, and asked her to go and marry to the Buthelezi so that the relationship can be restored once more. So it was restored, and Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi was born as a result of that in 1928. He himself became Prime Minister in 1954, and for over close to 70 years, he's been perfecting his craft and personifying really this role of traditional Prime Minister. This time around, it's still very necessary for that relationship to be restored. I don't know how it will be restored. One of the ways, for example, could be to look at, again, how the Buthelezi family can either take up the position or some of the positions in the royal household, in the kingdom side of the royal household, so that it can go back to being normal again. In addition to, of course, maybe whatever was discussed and tensions were there between His Majesty and Prime Minister get ironed out in a ritual manner, and then maybe to demonstrate that it's not going to happen again. Maybe go in the direction of the Buthelezi family again to look for a Prime Minister. Maybe not, but it's one of the ways that can be explored.
Yeah. So you're saying the position of the Prime Minister could be used as the peacemaker in possibly the tensions that would be existing between Isilo and the Buthelezi clan?
Well, if it's used like that, then it would be a repetition of the 1925 scenario. It has happened before. Of course, now that's almost 100 years ago.
Yeah.
But because there has been a precedent of it can be done even now.
Yeah.
As a way, as I say again.
And what would it create tension if Misuzulu decides to go the way of Dingane, the way of Mbande, the way of Isilo Sasondini in terms of pronouncing their own preferred Prime Minister?
Yes. No. Ngomane of the Mleche did not come from the Buthelezi clan. The Prime Minister to King Dingane did not come from there. The Prime Minister to King Band did not come from there. It's not a hereditary position. It's not because that Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi was the traditional Prime Minister, therefore his son will necessarily be the successor. What I was merely saying is that it could be a repetition of the 1925 scenario, but the way I look at it, and maybe yourself, you've seen there's many people who seem to be touted as possibilities of being Prime Minister.
Dr. Zwelithini Mkhize, for example, being one name that's being touted about in the newspapers. What's the likelihood of that?
Yeah, well, it's quite likely. It's quite likely that it will be him. He has been a minister at national level. He's been a premier. He's more or less a traditionalist himself. He likes things traditional. It could be him. We may not be surprised if that happens. Others say maybe this post does not need somebody with a high political profile. But you're not going to get people really who don't have some kind of profile in one way or the other, even political profile. So the king will have to look for somebody who's very, very firm, who's acceptable, who is familiar with the traditional leadership systems, especially the Zulu King structures and systems, and negotiate very well with AmaKhosi to accept such a person. I think Dr. Zweli Mkhize, for example, could be fine as well.
Professor Xulu, unfortunately because of time, I appreciate you. Let's leave it there. That is Professor Musa Xulu, cultural expert.